Well, let's stay with China because the annual consumer inflation slowed there more than expected to 1.6% in September, a level not seen since January 2010. And according to a report by the UK's Overseas Development Institute, the economic slowdown there will continue and it could be a lot worse than expected. It's also warning that unless the Chinese government takes decisive action now, the slump threatens millions of people whose jobs are highly dependent on goods coming out of China and, of course, goods going in. Well, here to explain all of this is Judith Tyson from the Overseas Development Institute, and she is one of the authors of this report. Judith, thank you very much indeed for coming in. So why are you so worried about China?
Well, as you mentioned, the current forecast for growth in China around 7%. We believe that they're very overly optimistic, and the reason is because they haven't fully taken into account the risks that are building in the Chinese financial sector.
And those risks being toxic debt?
In particular, toxic debt relating to the property bubble that we've seen. The level of lending in China has expanded hugely in the last 5 years. It's now 207% of GDP. A large percentage of that relates to real estate lending. And of course, the real estate markets in China today are collapsing.
Because I remember at the beginning of this year, there was some key reports coming out from some of the big investment banks highlighting this issue and really flagging up the concern about the housing market, about bad debt in China. But as the years progressed, it's kind of gone away again. So is the problem being tackled by the authorities or not?
Well, the authorities have put some sticky plasters on the problem. There's been more recognition of bad debts. The level of reserves has doubled since last year, but we still believe that that's not adequate when you look at what is happening in the real estate market today.
If China did have a crisis, i.e. a bubble burst in a significant way in the housing market, or there was a hard landing or whatever, haven't they got enough cash in the bank to sort it out, unlike Western economies where we have huge debt?
Yes, clearly they're in a more advantageous position like that because their reserves are so high. So they have the money available. The question is, do they have the will to act? And in particular, the vested interests in the Communist Party seem to not want the real estate markets to decline. And as we know this year, there's been repeated stimulus, but the impact of that is to pump the real estate market back up. And historically, this has always ended badly. The sooner you take the pain through the banks, the smaller is the impact on your economy. And if you continue to allow the housing markets to inflate and wait, the harder is the landing that is required.
If you're right, and these growth numbers that you say are correct, i.e. a lot worse than we think, who's most exposed in terms of other countries?
Well, of course, China today is connected to nearly all economies globally, but we think there's a particular vulnerability around poor countries. The reason for that is because they've really benefited from the boom in China in recent years. So if that fair winds stop, then they're very exposed, particularly commodity exporters. There's a number of names in Africa and Asia, for example, Zambia, Mongolia, Pakistan, Philippines, Vietnam, and they're countries where there's significant poverty levels. So there's a real risk for those countries.
OK, Judith Tyson for now. Thank you very much indeed. Of course, we keep an eye on China, as you know, if you watch this show regularly. Now, let's talk about an issue that affects all of us. We're becoming